It is not every day you get to hear stories about airplanes that find difficulties whenever they want to land. And if you were there in 2007, the story of a passenger plane exhausting the runway will perhaps still make you gasp in surprise. What really happened to Iberia Flight 6463? Subscribe, ring the notification bell, and sit tight as we go into the details of this flight and the misfortune it encountered. An Iberia Airbus A340-600 with registration ECJOH overran the runway 35 in Quito while performing flight IB 6463 from Madrid, Spain to Quito, Ecuador. It had 345 passengers and 14 crew and was believed to be affected by rain and reduced visibility at 17:05 local time. The airplane received substantial damage and was subsequently written off. While the passengers were evacuated, only 2 passengers received minor injuries. After the incident, the Dirección General de Aviación Civil del Ecuador released a final report in Spanish concluding that the probable cause of the accident was the crew's decision to begin and carry out the approach to the airport of Quito despite the known runway and weather conditions and aircraft weight, and not to abort the approach when the capture of the Papi glide path brought the airplane outside the parameters of a stabilized approach. This resulted in a hard landing, damaging important parts of the aircraft, making it impossible to stop the airplane on the runway. They also outlined a number of contributing factors, including failure on the part of crew who did not have regulations and specific procedures for the airport of Quito, as the briefing by the operator did not match the real conditions. The crew, although experienced in Quito and similar airports, had no experience in similar weather conditions, which would have allowed them to develop a strategy for the approach, determining necessary runway length, minimum altitude, and change from ILS glide scope to Papi visual glide path, detailed briefing of the approach permitting no deviation from the briefed procedure, and weather conditions such as tailwind, visibility, and moderate rain. The crew had received weather data via ATIS, telling them winds coming from 170 degrees at 6 knots, visibility 3,000 meters and more than 10,000 meters north of the station, moderate rain, fog in the vicinity, clouds in 150 meters, approximately 500 feet, in 780 meters, about 2,500 feet, at 3,000 meters, 10,000 feet, and temperature 13 degrees centigrade. The dew point was also estimated at 11 degrees centigrade, as well as estimated moderate thunderstorms. The braking action was reported average. Two minutes prior to landing, the crew reported they were established on the localizer and were handed off to the tower frequency. The tower reported braking action medium to poor following 2 pilot reports who had landed earlier. The crew therefore changed their auto brake setting from 4 to high. 30 seconds prior to touchdown, the crew reported the runway in sight. The tower advised winds 170 at 4. Runway was wet, braking action was poor, and therefore cleared the airplane to land on runway 35. 22 seconds prior to touchdown, the commander, pilot flying, decided to leave the glide scope indication and establish on the visual glide path defined by the Papis. The airplane touched down 200 meters from the runway threshold, experiencing a vertical acceleration of 3.09 g. Upon touchdown, the spoilers deployed automatically, the tires 3 and 8 blew, wiring harnesses of both main gear struts broke, leaving the engines in approach idle. The flap lever was involuntarily moved from full to position 2. Auto brakes indicated defective due to loss of wheel tachometer signals, which made the crew apply full manual braking about 3 seconds after touchdown. 20 seconds later, the crew disconnected the anti-skid system while still applying full manual braking. The airplane departed the runway end with a ground speed of about 90 knots, impacted the localizer antenna, and stopped 232 meters past the runway end in the security zone. The passengers were evacuated using slides about 30 minutes after landing. The airplane received substantial damage to the left main gear strut, which was broken at the base separating from its wing attachment. The wheel bogie beam was also broken, hydraulic lines and electrical harnesses were ruptured, and the lower articulation link was broken into 3 pieces. Also, the right main gear strut was bent outwards by about 5 to 10 degrees and showed the hydraulics lines and electrical harness ruptured. The lower articulation link was broken into 2 parts. The body gear remained in its position fully extended and locked. Apart from the damaged wiring harnesses, there was no evidence of damages to the brakes. All tires except number 6 deflated. The left main landing gear damper separated from the aircraft upon impact with the localizer antenna. The engine pylons 1 and 2, both left, were deformed by torsion to the right. The left wing had a crack at the lower surface, resulting in a fuel spill. Several rivets detached. The upper surface showed a fissure in the area of the left main landing gear support. About 30% of the access doors of the overhead lockers went out of their position. The lavatory door 53L separated from its pivots. The upper panels between seat row 44 and 45 separated. Several vents were loose. The instrument landing system of the airport was destroyed. The captain, 51 at the time, had a total of 14,024 hours flying experience, thereof 2,375 on type. The flight was his 7th into Quito. The first officer, aged 40, had a total of 10,095 hours flying experience, thereof 1,742 on type. The flight was his 6th flight to Quito. The second officer, who was 38, had a total of 8,924 hours total flying experience, thereof 2,793 hours on type. The accident flight was his 8th to Quito. The instrument approach chart warned that following the ILS glide path at 3.2 degrees left a landing distance of just 2,610 meters instead of 3,120 meters available using the visual glide path. The flight data recorder showed that the airplane was touching down at a calibrated airspeed of 153 knots, an actual ground speed of 188 knots at a vertical speed of more than 1,100 feet per minute, resulting in a vertical acceleration of 3.09 g. The airplane had been doing a 960 feet per minute sync rate down to about 9,700 feet at a calibrated airspeed of 153 knots and 188 knots above ground. Then a pitch down command occurred, resulting in about 1,500 feet per minute sync rate, descending through 400 feet down to 200 feet. At 130 feet, the sync rate had reduced to 992 feet per minute, but increased again. Computations of the landing performance showed that given the airplane's weight, aircraft configuration, weather, and runway conditions, the landing distance required was 2,984 meters, leaving a reserve of 136 meters for the full runway length, but did not permit a touchdown following the ILS glide slope indication. Following the PAPI indications, the airplane was permitted to land. Examination of the lower articulation link showed corrosion resulting in weakened material hardness that could no longer fulfill the JAR requirements, however remained within construction tolerances. Simulator tests showed that the airplane cannot be stabilized at 500 feet AGL as required in visual conditions if the transfer from ILS glide scope to PAPI visual path is initiated at 652 feet AGL. The operator did not specify a minimum altitude above which the change from ILS glide slope to the visual PAPI glide path was permitted. The incident happened to be one of the most fascinating cases of airplane accidents in the aviation world. Do you think it could have been averted? Let us know in the comment section. Like and share the video with your friends. Also, do not forget to subscribe and turn on post notifications.